Hello, today I'm going to share with you how to cut and sew a simple bustier dress with ruffle. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, please hit on the subscribe button. So here is my pattern from where we stopped for the last time, and for this pattern I cut it on fold and I added sewing allowance. On this other part I added sewing allowance on this part, and I cut this out on two pieces. So for the back I added sewing allowance at the lower part at the and at the upper part, sorry, that is joining allowance or turn up allowance. So I went ahead to notch my that, and at the sides I did not add because I've already added my sewing allowance. So I'm going to use this to cut out the wadding of my dress. I'll cut from the underbust, and from the side I'll mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2, and I'll add 1 inch. My nipple to nipple is 7 divided by 2, I have 3.5. After adding 1 inch I have about 4.5. I'll connect and I'll go ahead to cut it out this way. So I'm going to use this to cut out my wadding. So here is my wadding. I've gone ahead to cut it. So at the side I added half inch, and on top I added, so do not add half inch at the lower part of your pattern. So here on my wadding I'm going to place it at the center of my fabric, and I'm going to go ahead to iron this out. So I'm using a light wadding because I don't have much bust, but you can go ahead and use the thicker one. And also you can go ahead and use also a brack up. So if you're using a brack up, you're just going to go ahead to stitch up your fabric first before attaching your cup. So here's my pattern. I've gone ahead to iron it out. So this is what I have. So next step, you're going to go ahead and place it this way, and you're going to stitch with half inch. On the other side you're going to place your pattern, and you're going to stitch with half inch also. On the lining piece of this, I went ahead to iron gum stay on it. So here on the back pattern, this is what I have. So for the back, I'm not attaching any sewing interface on it. I'm just going to turn it up with my lining. I don't want the dress to be a bit stiff. So, and if you're making use of a stretchy fabric, please go ahead and iron a stay on it. So for this I'm going to stitch on this part, on the upper part and by the side. So if you're making this for your client, it's advisable to use a stretchy fabric to do this. So I'm just working with what I have at home. So here is my bustier, and I've gone ahead to join it. I'll just go ahead to notch the joining part, that is the half inch round. So now if you're using a breast cup, you're going to go ahead and attach your breast cup at this point, placing it at your under bust and then down to the upper part of your dress. So this is what I have. So I'll go ahead to iron it out with my tailor's ham, and after I'm done ironing, this is what I have. I'll also go ahead to notch the lining, and after I'm done notching my lining, I'm going to be placing it on it together this way. So I'm going to be stitching it with half inch. I'll go ahead and start from the side down to the upper part, and I'll stitch by the side. Make sure you pin yours before you go ahead to stitch. After you're done sewing, go ahead to also notch it just like we did, so that it's going to relax. So if you're going to top stitch your sewing down to the lining, go ahead and stitch your lining, that is the half inch to the lining part, if you prefer stitching it that way or you don't like notching yours. So after that I'm going to turn it to the right side, and I'll go ahead and use my tailor's ham to iron it inside because there's no ironing source of light for me out here. So this is what I have. So after this we're moving down to the skirt pattern. So here is my skirt, and I've used my pattern to cut this out. So now I'm going to cut out the lining of the skirt. To cut out the lining of the skirt, I'm just going to draw this part out, and I'll measure about 1.5 inches away from my starting point. This is to have a turn up effect on the skirt. So while I was recording, I didn't know that I didn't actually record that part. So whatever you have, minus about 1.5 inches if you followed my pattern. Now you're going to place, and I'm going to stitch the lower part with half inch. So after you're done stitching, this is what you have. Now you're going to pull your fabric this way, measure about 1.5 inches. So when you pull that out, you notice that the beginning and the ending of the fabric will be meeting. So now all you're going to do is just to go ahead to pin down your skirt pattern, and you're going to stitch it from the side with half inch. So you're also going to go ahead to stitch the back pattern the same way. So now this is my front pattern. To join it to the lower part, I'm going to fold it up this way and I will notch. So sorry I could not iron out my skirt when I was sewing because there was no light. Actually the light was cut short. Now I'm going to bring the skirt pattern and I'm going to notch the center. Go ahead and fold it this way and you're going to notch the center. You're going to place the notch parts together and you're going to stitch it with half inch. Place it this way and stitch with half inch at the waistline. Now heading over to the back, this is my back pattern and I've turned it up and I went ahead also to iron it. Now remember we notched the dart and I'll place my tape at 7 inches, go up a bit by half. That is our chest line. Remember at the back we added half inch. So from there I'll measure my shoulder to bust plus 1 inch and I'll go ahead to sew my dart at the back. So if you don't understand what I did at this point, please leave the question at the comment section. So here is the back pattern and the skirt pattern, and you're going to go ahead to join your skirt to the upper part with half inch at this point. After I'm done stitching, I went ahead to pin it and I'll mark like 1 inch from the beginning to the end of my pattern. So because I'm not using a stretchy fabric, I can't stitch it up together. I have to create a slit about 5 inches. So if you're making this for your clients, go ahead and use a stretchy fabric so that you can stitch the lower part and the ruffle will go all the way down. So I'm just going to measure about 7 inches so that I'll insert my zip and then I'll stitch the lower part with 1 inch. So after I'm done attaching my zipper, this is what I have for the back pattern. Now I'm going to place and I will stitch together. So I'll go ahead to pin my pattern, the front and the back together. So it's time to insert my measurements. I'm going to place my tape starting from my underbust. My underbust is 12, and if you take note, the 7 inches aligns with the armhole. So I'll mark my underbust, mark my bust point, which is 9 inches. Here is the waist part, and from there I'm going to measure about 7 inches, which is my hip point. For a much taller person, go ahead to use it. So my bust circumference is 33 divided by 2. I have 16 and a half. Measuring here, what I have is 6 and a half. So that 16 and a half, I'll take away 6 and a half from it, so I'm left with 10 inches. So that 10 inches, I'll mark 5 inches on this point, mark 5 inches on the other point. So by the time you're done, I'm just going to go ahead to take it upwards at this point. So 5 inches plus 5, you have 10, plus 6 and a half, that is 16 and a half. 16 and a half plus 16 and a half will give you 33. So at the under bust, I'll measure what I have here, which is 5.5, and my under bust circumference is 28 divided by 2. I have 14. So 14 minus 5.5, I'm left with 8.5 inches. That 8.5, I'm going to fold it. Whatever I have on this side, I'll place and mark. Then I'll also fold and mark at the other side. So this is a way to shape your bustier so that the joining will align at the center. So coming to my waist, I'll measure what I have here, which is 4.5 inches, and my waist circumference is 28 divided by 2. I have 14. So that 14, I'll take out 4.5 from it and fold my tape. Whatever I have, I'll mark at both sides of my waist, just like we did. You can go ahead and place your tape just to reconfirm your measurements. So at the hip point, I'm going to place my tape and I'll divide my hip circumference into 2 and I'll go ahead to mark. At the lower part of my pattern, I'm going to go ahead to mark 1.5 on each part, and I will go ahead to connect. So if you don't want it to be too fitted, just go ahead and mark 1 inch. You can also mark 2 inches, but that will be very difficult for you to work, and because this fabric is not a stretchy fabric, so go ahead and connect your pattern. So after I'm done connecting, I'll go over to the sewing machine and I'll stitch. Now we're going to create our ruffle. So for my ruffle, I just had 2.5, almost 2.5 yards. So now for the width, I have about 24 inches. So what I did was I measured 24 inches and I cut out and I joined it together. So this is the length of one part that I cut out, which is about 76 inches, and after that I had to cut another piece, then I joined it together. So I have a very long strip. You can even cut like 3 more pieces to join it together. So after that, go ahead and fold the 24 inches together and stitch. So you'll be having 12 inches. So after I was done stitching, I went ahead to fold the mount, and when I was folding it, I make sure that the joining was at the center of the fabric. So when I was sewing, I forgot to mention that one edge I made it a bit smaller. So this is to create the rows at the side, but I could not do that because I had a slit at the back of my dress. So that is why I was saying, if you're actually making this for your client, please use a stretchy fabric, so that by the time you're done gathering the fabric, you're going to create a ruffle by the side. So this is the ruffle I have created, and I will be explaining how I did this. So to create this ruffle, I used a needle and thread. Actually, you can go ahead and use your sewing machine, sew a gather stitch and gather it, but I passed a thread through a needle and I went ahead to just stitch it up this way, and after I was done sewing, I dragged the thread to create a ruffle. So I continued doing this till I got to the end. So this is the result that I have. So I'm going to continue stitching, and make sure that you're stitching it at the center of your fabric. After I was done making the ruffles, this is what I have. So you have to measure the lower part of your skirt and make sure that your ruffle is exactly the length of your skirt, that is the lower part, before you go ahead to cut it out. So now this is my dress and I have shaped it. So I'm going to be explaining to you the reason why I said if you're making it for a client, please make use of a stretchy fabric. So for me, I had a slit, so I started adding the ruffle to my dress from this point. So when you place the ruffle on your dress, you can measure up to like 2 inches or 3 inches and then place the ruffle and stitch. But from what we have at the thumbnail, you notice we have a rose here. So if you're making it for your client, you have to go ahead and stitch up the zip. Let's say you're making use of a stretchy fabric. So instead of starting at the end of the fabric, you're going to start by the side of the fabric, so that by the time you start from the side and you start adding the ruffle to the dress, you're going to end up at the other side of the dress also, and with that way you'll be able to create a ruffle at the other end. So let's say you place it from the side here. Now you continue placing your ruffle, and when you're placing it, go ahead to pin, then you pin it round. So you notice that it's going to end at the other side. So from here at the side, you're going to create that ruffle. So I was not able to do this because I had a slit at the back. So I'll go ahead and place this, and I'll use pin to hold it down first. So after holding it down, I'll go ahead and stitch it on that place on the machine. So while you're pinning, you're going to pin on that place that you gathered at the center. This is very important because you're going to actually stitch on it. So when you're stitching, you're going to stitch it very slowly so that you don't stitch elsewhere. So I'm just going to go ahead to pin the two ends of my slits first, and I'm going to pin it round. So when you're pinning, you're going to take it gently and pin on that place that you gathered. So after that, you're going to top stitch on that part also, and make sure that the ruffle goes round the skirt. So after I was done pinning, I went ahead to top stitch it on that same spot that I pinned it, that place that you gathered, and this is my final result.